This is The Crossover.
Crossover podcast, Chris Mannix and Howard Beck. What's happening, Beck?
What's going on, Chris? We got a series.
We got a series, but you are at the series. You are in Milwaukee. You were there for Game 3. You'll be there for Game 4. Did you remember where the Delta Sky Club Lounge was? Do you remember how the Marriott Concierge Lounge works? I mean, how are those? Did those muscles atrophy to the point of no return?
Pretty close. But I hadn't been to Milwaukee in a few years. It's only the second time I've ever been in their new building.
Yeah.
And plus, everything's just different and weird. So imagine being at a finals press conference where normally there's hundreds of us packed into a room, usually way too closely together. Now imagine 14. I think there were 14 of us in the press conferences last night because of COVID and just the restrictions and limitations that the NBA has to put on this thing. So covering a finals game, on the one hand, the building sounded like a finals game. Like Fiserv Forum rocked. Bucks fans were totally into it. There were 25,000 people outside. It was insane. So the atmosphere in Milwaukee, totally charged up, all that. Inside the building, fine. Inside the press areas where we're normally used to it just having this certain feel, very different. Very different.
Yeah, definitely different. But good to see that Deer District, as you said, filled up with people. It's why they created that space for situations just like this. And, going back to the start of the playoffs, it's been great having fans back at the building. Really just changed the atmosphere from what it was in the bubble last year. By the way, before I forget, great job with Spencer Dinwiddie last week. Really interesting conversation you had with the Nets guard who made some news with some talk about his contract. I recommend people go and listen to that. Do you have somebody scheduled yet for this week on Friday?
I do indeed. I will have both Mark Lasry, co-owner of the Milwaukee Bucks, and his son Alex Lasry, who's of course an executive with the team and also running for Senate here in the state of Wisconsin. So that should be a fun conversation about the Bucks, the business of the NBA, maybe a little politics. We'll hit it all.
I give the Lasry family and all the members of that ownership group credit. I mean, when they bought that team, I thought they were going to try to move it. I really did, because neither one of them are from Milwaukee. Every time somebody new buys a team, we start casting a wandering eye towards Seattle to see if that's going to happen. But they've invested, man. They doubled down on that investment and have kept that team Milwaukee. So I'm looking forward to hearing them on the podcast later this week. On this episode, Howard, we're going to talk about Game 3, setting up Game 4 on Wednesday. Going to dive into USA basketball. One of the more embarrassing losses we've seen in USA basketball history happened over the weekend. Is that cause for red alert with USA basketball? Damian Lillard spoke for the first time since the hiring of Chauncey Billups. We'll get into that, plus a couple other topics, including Jamahl Mosley is the new head coach for the Orlando Magic. But let's start, Howard, with Game 3 in Milwaukee. As close to a do-or-die game as you could have for the Bucks. And I guess unsurprisingly, they responded. I mean, they are a great home team. They've always been a team that feeds off that home crowd. But Giannis was great. Drew Holiday showed up for really the first time in these finals. Bobby Portis continues to have a really strong run of play that began at the end of the conference finals when Giannis went out of the lineup. Just give me your takeaways from what you saw in Game 3.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's funny because something I always try to remind people, and we have to remind ourselves of this too. In the playoffs, especially in the finals, maybe every round, no one game ever is definitive about what the series, the matchup, or anything is. I mean, maybe occasionally, right? You have the Warriors sweeping the Cavs one year. You could take any one of those games and it probably gave you all the indicators you needed to know that the Warriors were just far and away superior to the Cavaliers. But especially when teams are fairly evenly matched, you're going to have a game where the Suns go 20 for 40 from the three-point line as they did in Game 2. You could not expect that was going to be the way the rest of the series was going to go, especially as we change buildings. Home court advantage is still meaningful, especially now that we do have packed buildings again, and there is a home court advantage. All the things that we, kind of understand about the way players' kind of biorhythms go, it comes into play. So yeah, Guess what? Drew Holiday played better at home. That shouldn't have been a big shocker. Chris Middleton still wasn't a great game by his standards, but a much more solid game. Bobby Portis, as you mentioned. And, lo and behold, the Suns could not shoot 50% on volume three-point shooting. And credit the Bucks for better defense, but some of that, again, change of venue, right? This is the first finals for nearly everybody in this series on both teams, aside from Jay Crowder. So, okay, DeAndre Ayton had a tough game as a third-year player. Mikal Bridges had a tough game, a really tough game for him as a third-year player. Devin Booker, terrible game as a still young player making his first finals. And so, there's a lot of stuff that's just kind of like, you know what, this is how it goes at this level. And then on top of that, Giannis has another just amazing, awesome, every superlative you want to throw out there type of performance. And we've got a series now. I think there's every reason to believe the Bucks can tie this up. But I think there's also reason to believe from what we've seen from the Suns that was way beneath what they were capable of. Either outcome, I hate making predictions on these things. Either outcome wouldn't surprise me in Game 4.
I want to get into Giannis and Drew Holiday as well, but Portis, just to kind of put a bow on him, I thought going back to last offseason, he was one of the better free agent signings. They got him for a 2-year deal under $8 million. I couldn't figure out what Portis's big malfunction was that the market for him was so light. I was reading some comments he had in The Athletic earlier this week where he said he messaged Giannis and said, I want to come play with you. Like, the guy averaged 10 points per game with the Knicks last year. He had 5 rebounds per game. He shot 36% from 3, albeit in limited numbers, right around 2 or 3 attempts per game. Like, this guy can play. Like, when they signed him, I thought it was a good signing. Right now, it looks like a great signing because I'm not sure they're here playing in these finals without Bobby Portis.
Yeah, it's funny because certain players, their value, you can't define it by any one thing, right? There's no one elite thing there. He's not an elite three-point shooter. He's not an elite rim runner. He's not an elite shot blocker, an elite perimeter defender. Like, there's just a lot of things he does very well. He plays his friggin' butt off. He's always been a tough, hard-nosed guy. He's the kind of player who I think everybody wants on their team. And so, yeah, I mean, it's easy to underestimate him, but when you plug him into the right spot in a role on a team like this, you're going to get great results. He probably should have been played more in the first couple of games of this series. And now that they have, remedied that, I expect we'll see plenty of Bobby Portis for the rest of the series.
All right, Drew Holiday is the other non-Giannis player that was a big factor in this one. Game 1, he was awful. Game 2, he was slightly better than awful. Game 3, he showed up. 21 points, 8 of 14 from the floor, made 5 of his 10 three-pointers, 5 rebounds, 9 assists, played well against Chris Paul. I mean, he's indispensable to this team, Howard, because not only does he have to put up these type of numbers offensively, but whether it's Paul or Devin Booker, Holiday's got to show out on one of those guys. And I thought for the first time this series he did that. What did you think of the way Holiday played?
I mean, look, the numbers jump out more, but he also, I think, has a lot to do with why Chris Paul didn't really have, a dominating kind of game either as playmaker or scorer.
I agree.
And that's something that people had talked about through those first couple of games too, is like, how much do you want to dedicate Drew Holiday to stopping Chris Paul versus getting Devin Booker, getting into Devin Booker. I mean, it's a tough choice. I mean, you've got, 2 elite guards there that the Bucks have to worry about dealing with. But Holiday, again, like on the scoring side of it, is this just about being at home? Is it just comfort level? I mean, it may well be. Maybe he just had to find his way and find his rhythm in this series. And he's expending a lot at the defensive end. That's going to take away from your offense a little bit too. And so, I think sometimes, the first couple of games are just, guys getting a feel for things. And, the thing is, like, he was aggressive in game 2, especially early on, maybe too much so. I think the stat at one point I'd seen was that he had taken, I think he drove for like 8 layups and made 2 in game 2, something like that. Like, really rough, just couldn't finish. But the aggression was there. And so that's the kind of thing where it's like, you're going to tell your guy, just keep going. Just keep being aggressive. Your shots will fall. But generating that kind of energy you're going to have a positive effect overall. And I think that it was just a matter of him finding that rhythm last night.
Yeah, and like we said, he needs to keep playing like that for the rest of this series. Defensively, efficient at the very least, offensively for the Bucks to keep this momentum going and get a win in Game 4. Giannis has been out of his mind. Like this really is a remarkable performance series from Giannis. I mean, it seems like a lifetime ago now, given how he's played, but the severity of that injury in the conference finals and to come back as quickly as he did, and after kind of shaking out the rust in Game 1, putting up back-to-back just superhuman 40-plus point performances in Games 3 and Games 4, or Games 2 and Games 3. I mean, remarkable. I mean, I guess my question for you, Howard, is like, has Giannis elevated himself to another level in this series? I mean, it's still a long way to go, and obviously winning it would do even more for him, but it just seems to me like these playoffs and this series in particular have put Giannis, if he wasn't already, in that discussion for the best player in the game. And he's won MVPs, but I don't think he's often been considered the best player in the game. Even when he was winning MVPs, we were like, all right, Giannis is the MVP, but LeBron is the best player in the game. Maybe LeBron is still the best player in the game. Maybe Kevin Durant is the best player in the game. But if nothing else, I think Giannis has firmly entered the discussion as being the best player in basketball.
It's a tough one because you can find guys that are more complete, right? And when we have the best player discussion, and we usually do it at this time of year, right? So what happens is we get to the end of the regular season, the MVP votes are behind us, and then the playoffs start, and guys who maybe were laying in the weeds a little in the regular season, as LeBron has done certain years, or guys who were hurt a little in the regular season as Kawhi was and took games off. But we get to the playoffs and guys start having these dominant performances, and we start doing that discussion where, okay, the MVP vote is already behind us, and that was the regular season. Now that the playoffs are here and the games matter that much more, well, who's the best player in the game? And so when LeBron was hurt a couple years ago, it was, oh no, he's been replaced. It's Kawhi now. Or years it was maybe Steph, or it's been KD. And I'm not sure if it ever made much sense, Chris, to be honest. Like, the MVP discussion is about one season, so it's not best player in the game. It's just best player overall for that season. Who had the best season? The best player in the game, has probably never been anyone other than LeBron this entire time, and probably still is. And when we talk about bringing Giannis into it, I think the difficulty is, well, you start thinking about who's the most complete also, right? And there are holes in Giannis's game that we can still point to. They haven't mattered for the last couple of games. You go back-to-back 40 and 10, it's hard to nitpick about free throws or whether or not you have a consistent three-point shot or enough versatility in your mid-range game, right? Like, the results are the results. But if you're going to take everything out of context and just say, okay, who's the best player because of everything they've got in their bag? All right, other guys have deeper bags still. So all that said, if they win the championship, if they come back from 2-0, win this thing, we'll have a fair discussion on our hands, because he will probably finish this series with just insane statistics.
He will finish with insane statistics. And look, the one thing that's always bothered me about the Giannis discussion, and I've been on record about this before, that the whole he's a great regular season player who can't win a championship, can't play at the highest level in the playoffs. In the history of basketball, every player, almost every great player, has at one point not been able to win in the playoffs. Michael Jordan, before he was Michael Jordan in the 1990s, was getting dusted in the first round of the playoffs. LeBron James, do we forget those early years of LeBron when he was getting criticized at the end in Cleveland? Remember, LeBron, 2011, down 3-2 to Boston. He doesn't have that superhuman performance in Game 6. We're probably having another different conversation about LeBron James. Every player goes through this, and Giannis is in his mid-20s. We are finally seeing him put together a complete postseason. And when the light is shining the brightest, as it is right now, he's stepping up like all great players step up. So I think we are going to have, if they wind up winning this series, which is no foregone conclusion, of course, but if they wind up winning the series, there'll be a substantive debate to be had on Giannis being the best player in the game. Because even though he's not a shooter, he'll never be a shooter, everything else he does is great. Like, he rebounds great. He's a force of nature in the open floor. He's one of the best defenders in the entire NBA. So I do think there'll be a pretty robust discussion, Howard, when this series is over about Giannis's place among the greats.
There probably will be. And listen, some of the guys who have been in this discussion have some caveats on them now, right? Like, okay, LeBron had, missed a bunch of time this season and was still banged up in the playoffs, and he's way up there in years. And so, what's he going to look like next season? Is he ceding that title yet? And if he is, where is Kevin Durant in that? He couldn't get through his first full season post Achilles. Will he be able to get through next season? Or are we starting to see this decline where KD at his best is still incredibly dominant, but isn't on the court long enough? Kawhi Leonard obviously finished the playoffs on the shelf with injury and has not been able to play full seasons the last couple of years. And so when you start putting these caveats on about health or age or mileage, injuries, Steph Curry is, had an MVP type season, but again, the miles and age will come into play with him. So depending on how you want to view that discussion of best player in the game, if it's a guy that you think you can rely on for the next 3 to 4 years, well, certain guys are going to fall out of the discussion based on age alone. If it's just for that season, or the proverbial, I just need to win one playoff game or one game 7, there's still, 4 or 5 way debate that can happen there.
Yeah. It's always going to be a debate. It's always be subjective when it comes to those things. But Giannis, I think this is like the breakout year that so many great players had, and he was inevitably going to have. Last thing on this series, is there a big adjustment Phoenix has to make going into Game 4? I heard Chris Paul say we've got to figure out a way to kind of build that wall that teams have had success against Giannis. Miami, when you go back to last season's playoffs, had success doing that against Giannis. Is that the adjustment the Suns need to make? They've got other guys who can hurt you. They didn't have enough guys who could hurt you when they were playing Miami last year, which is one of the reasons why they smoked Miami this time. Of course, Miami also had Jake Crowder, who is now on the Suns. But the Heat had a way of defending the Bucks that was at least partially because the Bucks didn't have, say, a Drew Holiday. Didn't have Bobby Portis then either. This is a little bit different Bucks team. I also think a lot of this is just about the Suns, right? Like, I don't expect the Suns to go 20 for 40 from 3-point range again, but they should be a lot better. What was it, 9 for 31 or something last night? Devin Booker missed a bunch of shots. Was that just because of the defense? Some of those were just good open shots that he missed. Like, Devin Booker's a pretty great young scorer. I think he'll find his rhythm again. Mikal Bridges had a horrendous night offensively. Like, some of their guys, the guys who you rely on to make open shots, especially open threes, just didn't have it in Game 3. So for the Suns, I don't know that it's a major adjustment so much as it's like, because that's the thing too. You talk about the defense, and yes, you don't want Giannis dropping 40 on you every night, but the Suns couldn't score. Like, they were having a tough time just keeping up. So they need their 3-point shots to fall, and that's not necessarily an adjustment you can make. You just have to refine that rhythm. Yeah, I'm with you there, especially with Devin Booker. I think he got a lot of open looks that more likely than not will go down in this Game 4, and he's got to make them because those three, Booker, Paul, Ayton, those three guys, they got to play well for Phoenix to beat this Milwaukee team. All right, from the NBA, and we'll get back to the NBA in a second, but to USA Basketball. Oh, boy, Howard, USA Basketball. On Sunday, USA Basketball lost to Nigeria. In 2012, USA Basketball played Nigeria in the Olympics. They won that game by 83 points. Fast forward, 2021, exhibition game. Nigeria 90, USA Basketball 87. Now, Nigeria's come a long way. Mike Brown's now their head coach. They've got a bunch of NBA players, NBA caliber players as well on that roster. But this was pretty embarrassing. And I'm not really here for it's just an exhibition argument. I'm also, by the way, not here for the tremendous pivot that social media has done in the last week, where it was like 15 minutes ago, where USA Basketball was being lauded for for the players they put together. Like, wow, they got Kevin Durant to play. Damian Lillard's on the team. Bradley Beal's there. Hey, there's Jason Tatum. Now it's like, well, they're not sending the A-team. That's what I'm seeing on social media. Well, it's like, this is what happens when you don't send the A-team. Stop. The U.S. team, when the Olympics start, will be the most talented team in Tokyo. Hands down. No question. Most talented team in Tokyo with the roster that they have. But this is like a 5-alarm fire right now, Howard, with this loss to Nigeria. I don't care if they win the rest of these pre-Olympic games, which will take place through next Sunday. This has to make you nervous if you're a fan of the U.S. team. Because not only is it this, the loss to Nigeria, but you go back 2 years ago at the World Championships, where you had a U.S. team that was good, they were probably a better team now than they were back in 2019, but all NBA players. They finished 7th. They finished 7th at the World Championships. You have the 7th place finish, the loss to Nigeria. How concerned are you, Howard Beck, about USA basketball?
It's just an exhibition game, Chris.
Oh, no, it's not just an exhibition game. Stop.
This team was thrown together over the last however many weeks. They had, 3 practices, I think?
It's how every U.S. team is thrown together. What are you talking about? There's no, team... there's no mid-season practices for USA basketball.
No, but the Nigerian team has been practicing. What I'm saying is...
Some of them play in the NBA, though. A lot of the good ones play in the NBA. Gabe Vincent, NBA.
A few of them play in the NBA. But that team has had time together more so than the U.S. team.
I'm sorry. Was Mike Brown coaching that team? Did I miss? Was that a facsimile of Mike Brown on the Warriors bench all season long? What are we talking about?
The Warriors have been out for 2 months, Chris.
Okay. So 2 months. That's what matters. That's the number.
Three practices. Also, they're still missing, I believe, at least 3 guys because they're playing in the finals right now.
Yes, Booker, Middleton, Chris Paul. I get it. Yes. No, not Chris Paul. Chris Paul's not playing.
Holiday.
Who's the other one? Drew Holiday.
Those guys will matter, especially given that Middleton and Holiday are 2 of the better perimeter defenders that Team USA has. And if you look at the rest of Team USA's roster, I don't see a ton of great defenders there. There are a few.
Yeah, I think those 3 guys, by the way, are going to be exhausted by the time they get to...
They may well be. So if we're going to judge them, let's judge them when they're whole, and let's judge them when the games matter, too. It's strange to me, we don't judge NBA teams based on the preseason, but we judge Team USA based on these exhibition games that they do going into international competition, and I feel like it's
31-point favorites.
Why is there a betting line on a freaking exhibition game?
You can bet on anything. Bet on Little League Baseball now. I mean,
country of degenerates.
Damn right.
I didn't mean you, Chris, but
No, I'm with you. Let's go. I would have put some money on Nigeria money line.
I can't get too excited about this. If they lose the rest of the exhibitions, does that mean something? Yeah, that might be alarming. If they're still struggling to find some cohesion, that could be alarming. But I mean, the talent is obviously there. Talent alone doesn't win on the international stage. The style of game is different. Team ball matters. Shooting matters. There's a bunch of stuff that comes into play. But I find the panic over this loss, or at least the outcry, to be a little bit much.
So you don't take into account the 7th place finish in 2019? I mean, that to me, it's it's not just this game. It's the totality of it, right? And I don't know, Howard, so in the early 2000s, the world kind of caught up to the U.S. You had 92, 96, 2000 U.S. gold medals. Then comes the 2002 World Championships in Indianapolis, and that's 7th place finish, which is one of the worst outcomes in at least recent USA basketball history. They got it together after that. They hired Jerry Colangelo. They bring in Mike Krzyzewski. They get their act together. 2006, 2008, then they run off 3 consecutive years, or 3 consecutive cycles of gold medals. Is there an argument to be made that the world's caught up again? That somewhere along the way in the last 4 or 5 years, the rest of the world has once again caught up to USA basketball? Because I'm trying to understand this. I mean, they had some close games in those Olympic cycles, no question about it. But I can't imagine the 08, 12, or 16 team losing to Nigeria. I can't. Even exhibition or otherwise, I can't see it happening.
Right. No, the Redeem team and the one that followed it, were built around like LeBron and Kobe and Carmelo and Dwayne Wade. I mean, that group's at another level. Like, as good as this group is that we're seeing right now, as talented as they are, after KD, I mean, like, all right, Tatum's really good.
Damian Lillard is great. I mean, come on.
Yeah, but all right, but Tatum, Beal, Lillard, Adebayo, Levine, Draymond. Draymond's up there in years, but Draymond's has won some things. Jeremy Grant, Zach LaVine, Adebayo. Like, these aren't guys who have done anything in the NBA yet. Like,
yeah, but they're all stars. Most of them.
They're all stars. But all right, are they at the level of LeBron and Kobe?
No, but do you is that what you're saying then? Is that what you're saying then?
Yes.
You need to be at the level. You need to have
I'm
the
saying
cream of the crop to win.
I'm saying that if we're going to start comparing the 2021 team to the 2008, 2012 teams, there is not an equivalent right now of LeBron and Kobe. And LeBron, Kobe, and Wade, and plus, what we called Olympic Melo. Like, Carmelo didn't have the success in the NBA that some of his teammates did, but Carmelo, in terms of talent level and certainly his Olympic resume, like, that group was at a whole other level. That group is at a different level than Jason Tatum, Bam Adebayo, Zach LaVine. Okay, so I'm not saying that you necessarily should have to have that level of all-time firepower to win an exhibition game against Nigeria or anybody else, but I am saying, comparing USA to itself, different iterations of Team USA, this one is not that one. This is not as dominant a group as the ones we saw in 08 and 2012. It just isn't.
So what do you do? Like, what's the solution here? Like, I mean, look, Jerry Colangelo deserves an enormous amount of credit for rebuilding that program when it was at its nadir. Mike Krzyzewski comes in, enormous amount of credit for what they did. But as we sit here in 2021, like, it's almost, to me, Howard, like the USA basketball, like, rebuilding the program became cool. Like, LeBron wanted to do it. Chris Paul, like Dwayne Wade, these guys wanted to do it. And then they did it, and I think playing for USA basketball didn't become quite as cool as it was 15 years ago. Like, is that what has to happen? Like, does the U.S. team need to have like a 5th place finish in Tokyo for all of a sudden the next generation of A-list stars, whoever that may be, in 2024 to come back into the mix? And is that the only way this team can win?
I mean, I think we need to pay attention to just the overall context. Like, obviously, one, these Olympics were supposed to happen a year ago. They're delayed a year because of COVID.
No, they got Durant out of it, though. Like that,
right?
That's a plus for them.
It's questionable whether the Olympics should be happening at all still.
Yeah.
But along the way, because of these back-to-back, brutal seasons and everything else, like, Team USA doesn't have James Harden right now. Doesn't have Anthony Davis because of the injury. Doesn't have Steph Curry. Doesn't have Kyrie Irving. Doesn't have LeBron and Kawhi. Again, if your argument is that the second or third tier, it sounds like insulting somehow. But if you're saying that the next wave after those guys should still be good enough to dominate on the world stage, maybe. But if the point is that Team USA's best, are they still able to win gold fairly easily? Yeah, probably. But a bunch of them aren't on this team right now because of injuries and just the stresses of the last year or two. So this is not necessarily representative of the best right now. It just isn't. And yes, they should still be good enough to win. Yes, the world has caught up to some extent. No, the group that Nigeria has put out there last week does not leap off the page, and probably U.S. should have still won it. But again, first exhibition game after like 3 practices. Let's see what happens with the rest of this schedule.
I would have brought Melo back. I mean, he's not what he was 4 years ago, 8 years ago, 12 years ago, but the guy knows how to play international basketball.
He might have said no.
Maybe. I guess I just assumed that he just want to keep playing.
I mean, he formally retire. You don't retire from the Olympics, but he pretty much said, like, I'm done.
Like LeBron kind of did too, but you get talked into it. I feel like, I don't know. Well, if I was the USA team, I would have tried really hard to get Carmelo to play because his style, whatever it is to the NBA, is perfect for international basketball. He's a really good international basketball player. On this subject, Damian Lillard, he spoke for the first time since the hiring of Chauncey Billups. I want you to listen to what Lillard had to say about his future in Portland.
I'm prepared to go in and do my job every year like I always do. Hopefully we making strides in a positive direction, and we could become a better team. With a new coach, that's where I am with it.
So Howard, it sounds like Lillard is at least nominally on board with going back to the Blazers. But if I'm a team out there with assets, I don't listen to that response and say, well, it's over. Damian Lillard is back on the same page with the Portland Trail Blazers. If I'm a team with assets, I hold on to those assets because it feels to me like the Blazers might be one 16-20 start from blowing that whole thing up with Lillard and McCollum on the way out the door. So get the sense now that it seems more likely than not that Damian Lillard is at Blazers training camp. He's in a Blazers uniform. He starts the season with the Portland Trail Blazers. But if it doesn't work with Chauncey Billups early and you get close to that trade deadline, it wouldn't surprise me at all to see Portland decide, look, we've got to do something here and open the door for a Damian Lillard trade. What do you think?
I think that nothing has changed. I think that his remarks last week, because he sounded a little bit lukewarm or just, there was, you want to hear one of two things. Well, you want to hear one thing. If you're a Portland Trail Blazers fan, or if you're just looking for any indication that Lillard is all in, you want to hear him say, listen, I know things are rough right now, but I'm all in. This is where I want to be. Like, you want him to repeat all the usual talking points that you hear from players in his position, and that we've heard from Bradley Beal, that we used to hear from James Harden in Houston, which is, I want to win fill in the blank with this city. I want to win here. I don't want to go somewhere else. We're going to get this right, blah, blah, blah. He didn't go down the usual list. And so I think it left open some interpretation, but I don't think anything has changed. Like, the disappointment was clear when the season ended. Some other things have happened since, including obviously the train wreck of a way that they went about the coaching search, and Lillard being caught in the crossfire there and feeling heat from fans about Chauncey Billups being selected. And so I don't think we should expect he's going to be rah-rah right now. And the Trailblazers have a lot of work to do, but we also have not even hit the summer yet. Like, the draft hasn't happened yet. Free agency hasn't happened yet. There's a lot of work to be done. And I think if you're Damian Lillard, what you're probably doing is internally saying, here's what I need to see happen. And externally saying, let's wait and see. I mean, he can't say publicly the same things that he's telling, say, Neil O'Shea, right? About what the state of the roster. I would think that there are some very impassioned debates or discussions being had behind closed doors about what they need to do to get this thing right. And if they can't get it right, then he might shift his stance about staying there long term. But that hasn't happened yet that we know of.
What do you think the most interesting potential conversation is amongst players over these next 4 weeks? Like, I'm kind of curious what Jason Tatum and Bradley Beal talk about. Tatum and Beal, close friends dating back to their high school days, both went to the same high school. Beal was something of a mentor to Jason Tatum, actually got him involved with his trainer, Drew Hanlon, which helped Tatum elevate his personal skills. And they've talked about how happy they are to be playing together, played the All-Star game together for the first time. Beal, last year of his contract, we've seen these conversations yield, real tangible outcomes before. Is there like a conversation you'd like to be a fly on the wall on for any of these guys in the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, I mean, look, we have a history now going back over a decade. If we're to believe that the Heatles were formed in part through Team USA activities,
which is true. Yeah. Like that's yielded actual things. Guys who, so you mentioned Tatum and Beal because they were already friends, but guys also become friends through this experience, right? And then they start getting the ideas about playing together and like, oh, hey, this is a lot of fun. Let's do this again in the NBA. So I'm sure some of that is happening. It always does. Who else in that group? I mean,
Man, if I'm any of these guys, I'd be trying to recruit Bam Adebayo, but he's too early in his contract with Miami to pry him loose from there. And the Heat are still a pretty potent team, but Jimmy Butler's up there in miles, and Adebayo's future won't necessarily be there forever. That's the way it goes in the NBA.
I think Tatum has the potential to be like the biggest recruiter there. Like, he's about to start the first year of his max level extension. He can recruit Beal, but like, he can also, maybe he tells Damian Lillard, like, it's great to play in Boston. Like, I love it here. Answer some questions Lillard might have about playing on the East Coast for the first time. Like, I think, Tatum might be Boston's best asset at this point.
Yeah. Again, some of this comes down to like Bradley Beal's coming up to that point where he has the leverage to ask out if he decides to because of his contract. Lillard's under contract for several more years, and so he's not in that position. So, but if
Lillard says like I need to go, like, I don't foresee the Blazers being like, no, finish your contract. I just don't see it. I think
right,
they would work with him on a deal too.
Sure, but directing it is harder. So Beal can use the leverage of his free agency to say, well, if you send me to Team X, I'm not going to resign there, which then blows up that deal, and he can direct himself to the team he really wants to be at. Lillard would have a harder time to doing that because he doesn't have free agency looming to play that card.
Yeah. Well, I encourage any reporter that's in Tokyo, if you see Tatum, Beal, and Lillard talking to each other, just take a picture and then let the internet go wild. Let it go crazy, because it will, unquestionably. Last thing for you, Howard. The breaking news this week in the coaching ranks is that Jamahl Mosley is headed to Orlando. Mosley, of course, last with Dallas, a really well-respected assistant coach there who was a candidate for that Mavericks job before it went to Jason Kidd. My immediate reaction to that hire, Howard, beyond it, I think it being an excellent choice for Orlando, is that we're going to look at Mosley and Jason Kidd kind of on parallel tracks for the next couple of years. Mosley, there was a strong case to be made that he should have been elevated to that head coaching job. He had been considered for other head coaching jobs before, most recently in New York. He had, by all accounts, a great relationship with Luka Doncic. I understand bringing Kidd in. He's got a history with Dallas, and as Rick Carlisle said publicly, having a player that played the game like Kidd and having a player that plays the game like Doncic, makes some sense to pair those two guys together. But there's always going to be as I watch these two situations unfold, I'm going to wonder, did the Mavericks make the right choice letting Jamahl Mosley go and bringing Jason Kidd in?
Man, there's so many variables in this. The first being that Orlando's in step 1 or maybe even step 0 of a massive rebuild, right?
Like I think they're in the negatives right now. I think there's still maybe more fat to trim on that roster before they really bottom out.
Yeah, and you talk about trying to build around, Markelle Fultz and Jonathan Isaac.
They've loved Jonathan Isaac for so long. The guy keeps getting hurt, and he's a great player, but they've loved him in a weird way.
Jonathan Isaac stays healthy. He's still more of a complimentary star, right? Like he's like potentially a defensive player of the year at some point. He's not a guy who you're building an offense around, though. And Markelle Fultz, okay, he got himself back on track in Orlando. He has a career now where he didn't have one, but he's not a foundational building block. Like, come on, like that's crazy. So the roster doesn't have much talent. Jamahl Mosley is coming into a situation which a lot of first-time head coaches come into, which is, all right, there's a lot of work to do. So, you're going to have to do a lot of development. You're going to have to take a lot of lumps in the win-loss column. It's going to be rough going for the first year or two, or maybe 3. Let's see how quickly they can get things going. But, as it has been with certain other, Kenny Atkinson came into what looked like a completely hopeless situation in Brooklyn, but was known as a development coach in Atlanta. And sure enough, everybody who went there, Joe Harris, Spencer Dinwiddie, Jared Allen and Karis LeVert as lower first-round picks, guys who were, whether they were reclamation projects or whether they were low picks, everybody seemed to get better the second they went to Brooklyn and played under Kenny Atkinson and his staff. Can Jamahl Mosley have that kind of effect in Orlando? Can the front office get him the kind of guys that will thrive in that kind of environment and carve out careers for themselves and carve out identities? Jamahl Mosley has a lot going for him, and we've heard many great things about him, but we often hear great things about assistant coaches who don't end up panning out. And so we have to caution ourselves on these things, because I thought Brian Shaw was going to be a great head coach, and everybody loved him. All the players, sung his praises when he was associate head coach under Frank Vogel in Indiana. He goes to Denver, probably just the wrong guy at the wrong time, but he hasn't had another shot since then. But that went really badly. Brett Brown was really great in some respects for the early years of the process, and then suddenly it seemed like they'd hit some sort of ceiling. Igor Koshkov had been talked about for years as a great assistant coach, didn't work out so well as a head coach in Phoenix. David Fizdale, bumpy ride in Memphis and then disastrous in New York. Like, we just don't know. Like, Luke Walton, another example. Like, there are plenty of assistant coaches who, when they're assistants, we hear and see the best of them. And then, some of them go on and have great success as head coaches. I mean, Ty Lue has been fantastic. Mike Malone has been fantastic. Monty Williams, Nick Nurse, Dwayne Casey. I mean, a lot of longtime assistants get their shot, and then it works out, and some it doesn't, and it's all contextual. It's all just the opportunity you have. The thing for Dallas is they went with the guy who has more experience than Jason Kidd, but that experience was not necessarily good experience. Like, I think most people around the NBA would look at what he did in Milwaukee and Brooklyn and say, I'm going to steer clear. Maybe you'd rather have the unproven in Jamahl Mosley versus the somewhat proven in Jason Kidd. But I don't think we'll know what the right choice was there for, a while yet, because it's going to take some time before we can evaluate Mosley as a head coach. Hey,
and maybe Jason Kidd learned something in 2 years as an assistant. I mean, that happens. Working with LeBron for 2 entire seasons, working under Frank Vogel. Maybe he picked up some things that'll be useful to him as a head coach. With Jamahl Mosley, to me, the key is giving him time. Like, you've got to be committed to Mosley for a minimum, I think, of 3 years and more likely 5 years. And then you see what you have in a head coach. You mentioned Igor. I mean, it's worked out for Phoenix, absolutely, but I do think Igor got kind of hosed out there. I mean, he only had 1 year on the job, and that year was without DeAndre Ayton, Chris Paul. He had Devin Booker, of course, but that was not a good team that he was coaching there. I think you got to give Moses some rope, because you want to see what the guy can do when you put that team in a position to win. A great example to me is James Borrego in Charlotte. I mean, Borrego was one of those guys, assistant coach, elevated to a head coaching position in Charlotte. Not great the first couple of years there, but when he was given players and a chance to win, he did pretty well. I mean, up until LaMelo Ball went out, the Hornets were a really good team. And I think they will be a good team going forward, in part because I think Borrego is a pretty good coach. Like, I want to see this Magic team invest heavily in Jamahl Mosley. You're the guy, develop these guys, and we'll keep you around no matter what the one-loss record says until you get a chance to win. Then you judge him. Like Brett Brown, Sixers haven't done anything since Brett Brown left, but I can see the argument for letting go of Brett Brown. I mean, they had a talented team, and to a degree, they underachieved. But you got to let the coach get a roster on that level before you really make any decisions about whether they can coach.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing about this is what sets apart, I think, the good organizations from the bad ones, is that when you choose a guy, especially if he's a longtime assistant, not a guy with head coaching experience, and you've said, we believe in this guy. This is somebody has had a great track record as an assistant. We're going to give him his first opportunity. It's your obligation to, when you say investment, yeah, it's a time investment. It's give him all the tools to succeed, give him the time to succeed. You've decided you believe in him. So stand behind that. Have the conviction to stand behind that and take some lumps along the way. Maybe Memphis and or the Knicks should have stuck with David Fizdale longer. We had heard nothing but great things about Fizdale coming out of Miami initially. We may yet, find out that he could be a great head coach in the right situation. Maybe those weren't the right situations.
He might be one of those guys, though. I love Fizdale as an assist. He might be one of those guys, though, that just, the temperament is always important. Like the temperament, like in Memphis, he had some battles with Marc Gasol, didn't work out year plus in New York. He just might be one of those guys that doesn't have the right temperament to be, that's just based on what we've seen in Memphis and New York, that might be better suited for the assistant ranks. But if he succeeds in LA, I think he'll get another chance.
Right. Maybe. I think the point being, though, that if you as an organization have identified a guy and said, we believe in him, then okay, then believe in him, stick with him, and make sure you've given him, enough tools to succeed, instead of pulling the plug at the first sign of of struggle. And that's what happens in the NBA too often, is that teams panic, the fans turn, there's some, minor flare up. Oh, the coach and a player got into it, whatever. I mean, good teams that can happen on as well. And it's the way franchises react. So you have to know whether or not the guy is right and then stick with him. And so, yeah, I mean, listen, Jamahl Mosley should get a nice long, should get a ton of latitude in Orlando, given where they are as an organization, given the state of that roster.
Yeah, I agree. Howard, enjoy Milwaukee. Looking forward to hearing the conversation with the Lazarys on Friday. You can check out that podcast right here on the Crossover feed. Again, make sure you listen to Howard's interview with Spencer Dinwiddie from last week. It was really strong. Enjoy the Midwest, Howard. We'll talk when you're back on the Northeast.
Always a pleasure, my friend.
All right, the newest player in the pre-NBA basketball landscape is Overtime Elite, a league that will begin playing sometime in the fall and will be headlined by some of the top now former high school players in the country. Players will be paid a minimum of $100,000, with some making well north of that, and have access to high-level facilities, training, as well as educational programs. To help get a better grasp on that, I'm joined by Brandon Williams, who's the head of basketball operations for Overtime Elite, and Kevin Ollie, the former NBA guard, UConn coach, who is the head coach and director of player development. Brandon, I want to start here with you. Just kind of give me the 10,000-foot view of Overtime Elite. What are the objectives? What was behind the formation of this league?
Well, I think any of us, Chris, who've been around for a long time, have actually seen sort of the downside of young players who've entered into professional ranks. To this point, it's been the NBA, who are not ready. And so what does that mean? Not ready to perform and be stars, or is it just not ready to be, great teammates, or is it not ready to be good partners? It's sort of all that, the idea that the work day is much longer than they know, and that there's more responsibility to being a professional athlete. The responsibilities to their families and communities. We just have to do a better job preparing them. And here was an opportunity to be part of a program that wanted to address all that. I mean, it's not just about being a good player. It's like we want to address the whole athlete, the whole person. So on 3 levels, we're hitting basketball. That's the easiest thing to understand. I think business in our world is education. And then there's brand. These young people now are moving at a speed that we aren't as older folks. And they want to build things at an earlier age, particularly off the court. So building a brand is important, something that can last well beyond the tread on their tires. So we're hitting it in basketball, business, and brand. That's really the 30,000-foot view.
Kevin, what attracted you to this job?
Just like Brandon said, it's the whole person, being able to coach them from a mind, body, and soul experience, and understanding the mindfulness of an athlete. I've seen it from a pro level. I got an opportunity to play 13 years with 12 different teams. So I understand like the different trials and tribulations you go through with a player. Not saying that these players are going to go through that, but it's getting them more prepared if they do come into some certain situations where it's not typically going the right way. How can they manage that situation so what they do today can echo into tomorrow? And us having the ability to kind of paint on a blank canvas is what really attracted to me to this, OT league program, that we can take the player and really shape the curriculum. We're teaching them about subjects, but we're really teaching them about themselves as well, from media training, from mental health issues, all the different things that come involved, because we all know, Chris, it's stress, from success. It's a lot of pressures. It's a lot of people pulling at you. It's a lot of people want certain things, but how do you deal with that from a player standpoint, where you can play when you get on the basketball court and have clarity and not be caught up in the distractions of off the court issues? That's where it really, kind of evoked in my spirit to get back in it and have these kids, have these players be available at the moment of truth to make the right decisions. And that was very important to me.
Kevin, as you mentioned, you played in the NBA. Brandon, you played in the NBA as well. I want to ask both you guys, and Kevin, I'll start with you. Like, if this was available to you as a 16, 17-year-old, looking back, would you have found it attractive?
I would have definitely found it attractive. I kind of thought out the box anyway. I was from Crenshaw, from South Central, and I chose Connecticut. So, a place that I didn't even know nothing about growing up, so I always kind of thought out the box and never wanted to go down the path that everybody was going down. So I was always curious. And I think that's how my mom, especially my mom and my dad, raised me. So I'd have definitely been curious of this situation. Don't know, speaking now without took it. I'm not for sure. But I think it really gave me another option to look at it. And this is what we're trying to do. Not saying that the NCAA is wrong, overtime elite is wrong or right. It's not about that. It's about, if you really care about the student athletes, you give them as much options as possible. And I think this gives the elite student athlete another option. And I think, it's a very great option for them to have. And if they choose overtime elite, we're going to give our whole heart to make sure they're developed on and off the basketball court, Chris.
Well, I'll jump in there after Coach. It would have been interesting, Chris, but I certainly would not have been a candidate. I wasn't good enough. Let's just get that right. One of the things that's important, we sit down going through just grassroots community, and we spent months just talking to people, educating them about, what we're about, who we are. I mean, each of us has a reputation in some other space, not here. This program isn't for everybody. It's not the right fit for everybody. We are cherry picking in a lot of ways. These are players that feel like they are destined for professional basketball. There are a lot of 16-year-olds that don't know that yet. And their parents aren't convinced of that yet. And the people that support them don't feel that confidence yet. They may be another year away or 2 years away, but this is not the right path for everyone. 24 athletes, roughly 12 per class. We're looking at juniors and seniors. And the truth is, at this age, what's really funny about scouting them is everybody's skinny and lanky and underdeveloped and still has a mountain of upside to get through before you can really see who they're going to be. But, if you have a young player like Brandon Williams, who's just dreaming of being an NBA player, but there's not much certainty that that's even realistic, we got to be very careful about this approach and taking this, because there are risks. But for those that have already established, and this is the key, they've established that they are separated from their class. Jalen Lewis, as an example, the most recent example, he's elevated and separated. The draft isn't tomorrow, though, so there's still a lot of work to do. But he's already in a front running position, and it gives everyone a little confidence that this is the kind of investment and the kind of path that would make a ton of sense for players like that.
Let me follow up on that, Brandon, because you're entering what's suddenly become a fairly crowded space in terms of leagues like this. The G League Ignite is, one season in, but they've had a measure of success. We've seen Jalen Green, probably a top 3 pick, Jonathan Kuminga, top 5 or 6. And then you have, the NCAA with this recent ruling allowing top players to make money off their name, image, and likeness. How does the elite separate itself from that group?
Well, I think first is we start a little bit sooner. So the G League's doing a great job with what we call the gap year, the prep year, that year that recent graduates would be going to college, and they've already been hacking the system, going to Italy or China. So there's a market for those players. They're saying we want an alternative to college. For us, though, our players are seeking an alternative to high school. So we are a school. But when you think about the resources that we're bringing to the table, first of which being an NBA-like environment, starting with Coach Ollie, Coach Leto, and a robust set of staff. I mean, a scouting staff, a high-performance staff, an administrative team. Our goal was to simulate an NBA organization for young athletes at 16, 17, 18. There is no other environment like that. And I think the big way that we separate with high school athletes is that both domestically and internationally, we're able to put 24 of them together in a building. So what we're selling is the best competition for these guys starts, at home. I mean, every day in line. I mean, coaches don't manage the drills and manage the competition aspects of practice and getting them ready for games. But when you look to the right and left, and I know this as a player, there's no weak link. I mean, everywhere you look, there's somebody that's doing what you're doing or possibly doing more because they are not just dreaming about getting to the league or to the high level, but they're on their way there. That's where we've been able to, I think, create a little separation from others that have tried or looked at something like this.
Kevin, how do you approach this job? Do you do it in a similar mindset that you had at UConn, where you have young players? You also, at UConn, you had to keep them academically eligible. You had to follow that pretty closely. I mean, is it a similar mindset, or do you take a different tact?
I think you just let it be. It's not no similar. It's just whatever comes, you say yes to it and you cultivate hope from it. I never coached high school players. They was always, graduating from high school, and now they're freshmen. This situation is a little different. In college, you was recruiting guys for 2 to 3 years. This situation is a little different. But, for me, Chris, I love the unknown about it. And that's the space I live in. And I just want to make sure that I have the space and create, something in these players that they can just think about, they can build from, and have a foundation. So when they make the transition, they have every tool in their toolbox to say, okay, that's a problem. Let me assess it. Let me be able to correct it. Let me assess it. Let me be aware of it. And I think that's the difference between, coaching a high school kid and the college kid. I mean, you get able to mold them a little bit better. And then you have to understand where they at now. Back then I didn't have social media. We didn't have social media. Now, these kids and these players are building their brand a little bit earlier. And now you just meet them where they're at. And I can't wait to get them up on campus, get them up to Atlanta, just continue to build a great relationship with them, spend time with them one-on-one. And this situation is going to provide us to do a lot more skill development that I didn't have a really good opportunity. I wouldn't say a good opportunity. I didn't have the best opportunity because there's so many things. We're on the road recruiting. You on the road fundraising. These different things Brandon's taking care of, and Dan Porter is taking care of. I can just really coach the player and work on his skill development on and off the basketball court. So it's really giving me my own lane so I can really perform my job. But my job is really breaking down the relationships. It starts with relationship. It starts with trust. It starts with hope. It's spending time with the young student athletes on and off the basketball court and pushing them to greatness. And the competition is not on the outside. The competition is within. Can you beat your previous best self? Can you be better than today? Can you be better tomorrow than you were today? And that's what I'm coaching. And that's what I love to do. And I think we're going to have some great young men that's open, that's inviting, that's going to be vulnerable, that's going to try to reach for the sky. And the sky is just going to be our view. It's not going to be our limits. So I can't wait to get up to Atlanta. We've been having some mini camps, Chris. It's been wonderful to get back on the court with the guys. And I'm looking forward to the next mini camp and then looking forward to getting them up to Atlanta so we really can go to work.
When I was talking to Brian Shaw a couple of months ago, Kevin, about how he was coaching the Ignite, it was a lot of pro stuff he was trying to bring to that team. Are you taking that same approach? Are you trying to coach them like they're NBA players or something different?
No, it's nothing different. It's just I'm building pro habits. And every situation is going to be different, Chris. There's going to be some guys that come in, say, for instance, like a John Montero, where we got him and he, is a little bit more advanced than some of our other players because he's been a pro already. And then it's going to be another situation where we got a talented guy that might not, be able to get it as quick. But these opportunities, we can go at our own pace. We can sit down and talk to them. But we're really teaching and building pro habits. And those pro habits is going to translate over to them being great pros when that opportunity comes, if that's in the NBA or the Euro League. So every day, we're building like a practice plan, like more of a college practice plan, an NBA practice plan. We're doing drills that I got from my numerous stops in the NBA. We're doing sets in the NBA, but then we got to understand they're 16 years old as well, and maybe sometimes you got to, kind of dial it down a little bit. But I'm going to let that come. I'm going to let that go. I'm not going to focus on one of it, or I'm not going to say, we're doing this pro set each and every day. Every day is different. And that's what I love about the unknown. And I'm going to treat it like that. And we're just going to continue to build because I think we got great minds in the organization that really want to coach the whole person. And that's what I'm really excited about.
Brandon, not to continue to compare this team to the Ignite, but when I talked to Sharif Abdur-Rahim about that, I had asked him about the sustainability of that team, given how much money was being poured in to pay some of the players. And he bobbed and weaved like Floyd Mayweather trying to answer that question because, look, it's hard to commit to it without, say, a television contract or more sponsorships and things like that. Can you speak to kind of the sustainability of this? Because we've seen startups with an influx of cash, get in big the first year, but then peter out. I mean, what needs to happen for Overtime Elite to become a long-term successful program?
Well, it's got two answers. First, I think, proof of concept. I mean, we're selling on the ability to develop young players and have them more pro ready, right? So this is the path. We are offering basketball development, call it professional business development, and we are also like leveraging what is an incredible media platform. I think that, again, there are things that we like to call distinguishing factors. That's a huge one. So not to bob and weave, one, we got to be good at this. That's how you have longevity. I mean, the Spurs are the Spurs because they were good for a really long time. And so we've got to establish that we're good at this. No pressure on KO, right? The second piece, though, is, and this comes from my time in the NBA. It just wasn't that long ago where in a Chicago pre-draft combine interview, if a young guy said, I want to build my brand, everybody in the room was like smirking. And like, what are we talking about? Like, it's about basketball, and basketball. And, if you are a young team developing and not winning a lot of games, the truth is you can't sell just basketball because your basketball isn't great. You got to sell personalities and stories, and that there's something that people can invest in and fall in love with other than like the final score, right? Like, otherwise the Sixers had no chance, right? Or any developing team, you have to buy into a story. And for us, I think we have a chance to create stories, but we get a chance to show those stories because we have a platform. So it doesn't take much. I mean, I'm not a social media guru, but when I got recruited for this job, having been around the block a little bit, certainly from an NBA perspective, I heard a couple things that really got my attention. One was 50 million followers. That's eyeballs, and we all know that business follows the eyeballs in whatever respect. The other was, which is unfair because I think that number changes month over month, but it started at maybe 1.4 and now it's at maybe 1.8 or 1.9 billion with a B, billion views of content a month. That Overtime in some ways has found a way to the heart, the mind of young people. It is being communicated and sold as, the Generation Z, sort of media and content engine. We are doing an amazing thing here, which is developing young talent in a pure way. Like we want to make sure that they are prepared, top to bottom, to do well on the court, to do well in communities, to do well in business. But then there's this other thing, which is they want to be known. Like, no player wants to play in an empty building. Everybody wants to play where it matters. They want to play when they can rock and like the building and just people are like recognizing their talent. We're just artists. And one thing that is kind of showcased by one event that Overtime, the media company, produced, and that's called The Takeover, and you can see it on YouTube, is that over 100 million people watch that. I mean, that's not an insignificant number. That players that are going to play for Overtime Elite will have the opportunity to be known. The opportunity to bring big brands to the table and support this platform, if not already indicated by the kinds of investors that have shown interest, but the brands that are coming to the table. Our sustainability is going to be showing value, delivering value to not just the athletes, but to them over time.
Well, that visibility, I would imagine, is great for them, but can you monetize it? Like, can you make it so this league is in the black, or does it need to be in the black every year?
Well, the good news is, as a basketball man, I think no different than the NBA is I get a budget. My job is to be efficient and spend wisely. I'm not asked to sell tickets or generate revenue. That's for a tremendous and successful business operation team. Our job is to make sure that what we are delivering is a high level product. That if you see the growth and development of our young players once they're recruited, we've got to make them better. Right? They need to be able to perform. And probably the best testament of our success is going to be our NBA GM voting with his pick, right? Or with a coach saying like, damn, they did a nice job. This guy was well coached. testament to KO and the rest of the coaching staff, that if we're doing that, we'll prove successful, because guess what? The next crop of recruits, when we're in the gym, like, we're not chasing them. They're sort of meeting us at minimum halfway. We need to keep bringing high-level talent and developing talent to prove successful. And I have a tremendous set of partners across academics and across content and media that will do their part to elevate our business.
Kevin, you expecting to tap into some of your NBA relationships? I mean, as you mentioned, 13 teams and 12 seasons. You've made a lot of friends over the years. We're going to see like Sam Presti sitting in the crowd for one of your practices one of these days.
I hope so, Sam, and so many GMs that I know, Kevin Durant and all these guys that are our investors in Overtime, just having them be around. We had our first mini camp and Ray Allen showed up, and not only showed up, he brought his son to work out with our guys. It was just amazing to just see how the branches that we can, continue to pull up on, and they continue to pull on us and be a partnership in this thing is going to be great. It's going to be great.
Are you expecting to have kind of drop-ins like that? I know Durant's involved with the league, but I mean, are you expecting these guys to just be around, which I would imagine would be both a resource for you, but also an attractive quality to this league? Definitely. We're going to build a place where it's going to be hopefully a premier development destination for everybody. And, hopefully KD can come out and work out with our guys, and Russell Westbrook and James Harden and all these guys that, we know, and I know I had an opportunity to be involved in and kind of be the veteran of the guys. We want them to be around, because it's not just me showing them. It's also watching tape. Like, these are the different drills, and look how KD and look how Chris Paul is using the pick and rolls, and now they're showing up. That's a big thing for us, with us growing these young, talented student athletes, to get them inspired to the next level. And they're doing a great job. They not only do I coach them, Chris, they coach me on a day-to-day basis. I'm open to that. And we just really want to have a love affair with our guys. And at the end of the day, Chris, we want to appease the basketball guys. We want to play the right way. We want to share the basketball. We want to run. We want to have fun. We want to have enjoy the game. But it can't just be me. It has to be we. And I'm going to teach these guys how to be involved in any system they get drafted about. They can be a part of a productive system and be a productive partner in the community as well, no matter what city they go to when they ride to the NBA. Brandon, before I let you go, what's the schedule going to look like? I mean, is this team playing? Just walk me through kind of what these kids are getting into and what kind of schedule you're going to be able to put together.
So schedule, that is really interesting for everybody, and I want to try to illuminate, but I've got to be careful. We are still contracting with some teams. But for the audience, let's think about it in three buckets. We're going to play independent prep schools. That's going to be a significant part of our schedule. We are a high school, so we are looking to schedule some of the top independents that you would typically know to have a national schedule, that can travel, that have the ability to be mobile. We're scheduling home and away with those folks. And that looks like NEPSAC as an example. It looks like, folks that are playing for a national title, Arizona, Florida, California. So it'll be a widespread travel schedule for us. We're also looking at, European competition. So think about Junior EuroLeague as an example, or some of the best clubs, the INSEPs as an example. Where we can get a collection of 16 to 19-year-old elite talent to compete against us. And then, as I mentioned earlier on the show, we really feel like the best competition is going to come internally. And that's where our league play comes into effect. So we are looking at our group of 24 as 3 teams of 8. There will be standings. You'll be able to track. We'll compete against each other. That'll be a significant part of our schedule as well. We don't want to overextend our guys. One of the things we really want to correct, letting science guide us here, is minimize the wear and tear on their bodies while still developing and preparing for professional level play. So a schedule of maybe 35 to 40 games is our target. We start in September. Our training camp will begin play by mid-August. We'll be done by late March is how we see our schedule shaping up.
I'm looking forward to it. Brandon, Kevin, it's a really interesting concept, and I hope you guys have a lot of success with it. I'll certainly be watching. I know a lot of NBA people will be watching. But, Brandon, stay out of He's out of Massachusetts. Kevin has like some basketball PTSD from all those BC matchups, I'm sure. They probably were so tough on him over the years. I don't really remember, Kevin. It's not real. Like it's all in the past. We don't really need to talk about it. But.
Well, it's in the past. Leave it in the past. I think we beat y'all 26 times in a row. We'll leave that in the past, though.
Here we go.
That's not very nice. That's not very nice. Kevin, Brandon, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks so much.
Bye.